Just a warning before we begin. Today's episode might be among my most controversial episodes. Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome. My name is David Lane. It is great to be with you again. This is episode number 131. And yes, I do think that this episode might be one of my most controversial episodes because I know multiple teachers personally who would disagree with pretty much everything I'm going to say here today. Now, I know a lot of teachers who would also agree with me, but there's a good chance that your music teacher would listen to this and say, don't listen to him. This is not what you should do. But I'm going to explain why I do think it is what you should do, why I think it's a healthier approach. So I teach two things. I teach composition and I teach piano. Both of them involve technique. But I'm going to focus more on my experience as a piano teacher and also the philosophies of other piano teachers. But before I go further, let me tell you what the inspiration for this particular episode is, where it came from. So the primary way that I get my exercises in is I do body weight calisthenics. Some a little bit more complicated, but most of them are kind of like the old school calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups, squats, and a variety of others. And I try to do like a variety of different types of push-ups and pull-ups, squats at different angles. And in the calisthenics world, there are some kind of big moves, some impressive moves. One of them is called the muscle up. If you're not familiar with the muscle up, it starts as a pull-up on bars where you're using an overhand grip. I don't know that you could really do this move if you did an underhand grip. So you start off with an overhand pull-up and you get to the top and you continue to pull the rest of your body up, which then becomes a pushing motion until you have locked your arms out above the bar, and then you reverse the motion to come back down. It's a combination of a pull-up and a dip, but with the hands in a pull-up position. And it's a very demanding move, especially if you do it with strict motion. You keep your legs from moving. You start from a dead hang. You don't do what's called kipping by kicking with the legs, and you do it slowly. So this is with good technique. So what this video that I saw, I think it was a reel, it was about a minute long. He was comparing body weight training to like weightlifting. With weightlifting, you get to a certain amount that you can bench press or that you can curl or use in a squat, and you add weight to it. So if you can do a move with 100 pounds, you try to do it with 105, and then you try to do it with 110. So that's how you improve, is you add weight. But when you're doing body weight training, you really can't do that. So if you can get to a point to where you can do a move, well, how do you improve it? Well, you can increase the angle to make it tougher, or you can slow down the speed to make it more deliberate. But the big thing is you can perfect your form. So all of that implies, and the video brought this up as well, that you're not necessarily starting with good form. So while you're trying to get to a move and you're trying to avoid kipping with your legs, well, go ahead and kip with your legs. Like, here's my experience with just a generic pull-up. If you can't do a pull-up, and we'll change that to a chin-up. I think more people probably are able to do chin-ups than pull-ups, but let's say you can't do a chin-up. Well, there are a few things that you can do. First of all, grab a bar and just hang from it for 2 or 3 seconds, and then try to hang from it from 5 or 6 seconds, and then try to get it to 10 seconds, and then work on just starting to pull up to feel like you're shoulder blades are going downward as you do that, keeping your arms straight, and then hold that near the bottom of the position for as long as you can, up to 20 or 30 seconds. And then get a chair, get something that will allow you to reach the top of the bar and just jump or whatever you have to do to get into the top position of the pull-up and just hold it. And then lower yourself down as slowly as you can. And you could spend quite a bit of time just doing that. And then you jump up to the halfway point and pull yourself the rest of the way up. And then you try to just jump to the quarter mark and then pull yourself the rest of the way up. And then maybe you just jump from the ground to get going and pull yourself up, or give yourself just a little kick with the legs, the kipping. And then pull yourself up all the way. Ultimately, and this is important, and I hope that the piano teachers who disagree with me will hear this, because I am in full agreement. Form is important. But where I disagree is that it's not a prerequisite. At least most of it's not. Instead, jumping in to get some piano experience or violin experience or whatever your instrument is, and then perfecting the form will help you to go from good to great. So just a few examples. Again, I teach piano. So in piano, there is a rocking motion to the wrist that happens if your hand is placed on the white keys and you want to reach up to the black keys. So you have this rocking motion that allows your wrist to kind of go up and over the keys. And you'll be doing this quite a bit if you're doing a chromatic scale, or if you're doing any chords or arpeggios that involve a lot of sharps or flats. So again, the wrist goes up and forward as if it's trying to hover over those keys. When you do a scale or an arpeggio, you want to keep your arm aligned from the elbow to the wrist to the knuckle all the way to the key with every note that you play. This is kind of a horizontal movement, keeps you using all of your arm weight on each key. Another thing to keep in mind just about basic piano technique is that, if you look at your hand and you trace your fingers along the skin, for example, you'll get a false idea of where the finger ends. The finger actually goes all the way to about the middle of the hand if you trace the skeleton, and you move from those joints rather than from where you see the fingers beginning and ending on the flesh part of your hand. So here's what I would say to piano students, just generically. Obviously, when I'm working with specific students, we come up with a more tailored plan, but just generally speaking, the first thing you want to do is get used to the right notes and the right fingering combinations. So right notes with the right fingers. Whatever else is happening, let it happen. What's not happening, don't worry about it. And then get a little improvement with tempo, because it's really hard to do anything if you don't have kind of a minimum standard that you can play these techniques, whether they're scales or arpeggios or chord progressions. And then start working on one aspect of your form at a time. You can't improve everything at once, not without getting quite a bit frustrated. So maybe you focus on just the horizontal alignment as you play each note. Then you try to look at the vertical motion in your wrist. Then you try to pay more attention to how you're allowing your fingers to move. Is it following the natural skeletal shape of your hand? Are you putting too much emphasis on finger movement? So whatever it is that will perfect that shape, you work on it once at a time, but you do this after you have started off with the basics. And by the way, you can apply this to repertoire first. Work on the rhythm, work on the notes, the fingerings, and so forth, and then work on the quality of how you're playing it as you get more into it. Okay, two more examples of types of musicians, and these are more anecdotal, maybe with a little bit of minimal experience on my part. But let's talk about if you play a bowed string instrument, so violin, viola, cello, or bass. Again, I'm married to someone who has taught violin lessons before. and currently plays several gigs as a violinist or violist. Well, one good first thing is just to get the bow moving. Get used to holding the bow and just getting it moving. And the sound you make the very first time probably won't be very pleasing. And then after you've done that, you take the left hand and you get used to just putting it in the right place so that you know where certain notes are. And you get to where you can play something. It just may not sound like you think a violin or viola or cello or bass should at this point. But you get better at bowing. You get more accurate with it. And you gradually work on the shape of your hand. You gradually work on your intonation. And you gradually work on your tone, or eventually adding vibrato. And all of that develops organically. And I really feel like most string players understand this. I can't imagine there's a reputable string player that says, here's your first note and you're going to play it with vibrato and get a perfect bow before I allow you to play anything else. For some reason, a lot of my pianist colleagues, they have a philosophy that's kind of parallel to what I just said. So here's an example. If you are getting into singing, you want to become a vocalist. We recently talked about having a well-rounded voice a few months ago with Tao Nguyen. Highly recommend that episode if you're interested in this topic. But I would say the first thing you should do is, without any judgment, just use your voice and explore what it can do without judgment. Don't categorize it into good and bad. Think about bright, think about nasally, think about try to make it warm. See how high you can go, see how low you can go. Just explore it. And then at some point, take time to really focus on how you are breathing. And then pick one of the other mechanics and work on it one at a time. Maybe you want to work on your high notes. Maybe you want to work on your belt, the bright sound for that certain note. Maybe you want to work on your falsetto. Okay, so let me give you two things that I do believe are non-negotiable about technique when you're working in the very beginning on something. So the first rule is, at the very beginning, you want to focus only what is absolutely necessary to avoid long-term injury. There are ways that you could hold your wrist on the piano that could lead to tendinitis or carpal tunnel syndrome if left uncorrected. So you don't want to get into habits like, allowing your wrist to be lower than the keyboard so that you have the kind of this uphill climb going on. So look at the technique that is the minimal you need to have a grasp at before you get going. And then the second thing is, after you've jumped in and you've learned some basics, work on one aspect that will improve your overall technique, one thing at a time. Don't try to do more than one at a time. So that's going to wrap up today's episode. If you got anything out of this, in addition to clicking like on the video, hitting subscribe, whether you're listening on a podcast app or watching and listening on YouTube, please don't forget to click the thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't, if you're on YouTube. But thank you so much for listening. That's going to wrap up today's episode, but I will be back with you again next week.